Hey guys, welcome back to the 429 podcast. I'm 4,
Two.
I'm 9.
and today we have a really good episode for you. We're going to be talking about the right to privacy, and pretty much who owns your data? Do you own your data? Do companies own your data? When you give up data or you give consent for certain things to happen with it, how long do they retain that control? Right. So there's a handful of different topics that are kind of embedded within this, but essentially, like I said, the right to privacy is who controls your data and what can happen with it after you've given it up. So let's go ahead and we'll take kind of quick ideas on this too. What do you think? When you hear right to privacy, what are your first thoughts?
Sucks to say this, but TikTok. Right, my thoughts immediately went there. It's like,
My thoughts never go there.
well, my thoughts immediately went there with the whole scandal that's been going around with TikTok and everything, with the data issues and data privacy. Of course, other major social media platforms come to mind as well, such as Facebook, right?
Yep.
So it's like, it really makes you question that. I mean, the stuff you put online can be taken and interpreted in thousands of different ways, right? So it's just a question of, right, do you have the right to that stuff or do you not have the right to that stuff? But more importantly, that stuff you're making public, so obviously that's fine.
Yep.
But your own private information that you tell these websites or these apps or whatever that you want to keep private, right? And it doesn't stay private and it gets released, right? Like, who's liable at the end of the day? Are the companies liable for that? And if the companies are liable for that, why is it that we're only getting like $12 in a class action lawsuit? Like, my data is way more valuable than $12 from a class action lawsuit.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. When I think of privacy, it's totally anti-Facebook. That's pretty much, and the first thing that comes to my mind is opposite of Facebook. That's pretty much our privacy, and a lot of what you said, I kind of agree, similar points and stuff. But for me, it even goes a step further. Aside from the information that I give to these companies in a bond trust that, like, hey, you don't share them. I even take it a step further. Than when I think of privacy, I think, for you agree with me that it's even stuff that we don't even voluntarily share, that we see out in the public.
Yeah.
Like, I think the biggest examples are privacy breaches, and we get no notification about public information that we don't want it to be so public, that are tied to us as as identities. These are things that I think, as an individual, I have a right to retain from the public's eye, right?
Yep.
They may be public records, but I don't want it to be tied to me as an individual.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. And I think I should have a right to be like, you know what? I don't want my public information so easily accessible by people, especially by
So would
search.
you say an example of, say, like, if you bought a house, right? And this is a real thing not many people know about, but, like, for example, like, say you bought a house, right?
Yeah, I know where you're going with it.
The deed and the information of that is public record.
Yeah.
But it goes on the internet. So it's like, I could be sitting in, like, Missouri or something, right?
Yeah.
And just Google your name, and boom, I found out where you live, what's your address, how much you paid for the house, and all of that information. So are we referring to that type of data that should remain private? Or are we referring to other types of data?
So that's a really good question. So public records exist for one thing, for many reasons, right? They're public accountants of events and purchases. Same thing for, like, court battles and stuff that you're involved in, right? To an extent, they should be public, right? Because these are, as much as people don't want to believe, every time you go to a court battle, stuff like that, they're using, they're involved with the public eye, they're involved with individuals, stuff like that. They're using taxpayer money, so it's public records, right? The problem I have, realistically, is that companies like Yahoo, Google, right? They make it so accessible to essentially tie my individual identity to such things, right? Like, I don't mind if I, for example, buy a house, like you said, and the public records of the dean or stuff like that, or if I go to if I'm in a court battle, and a lot of counties' public records are of, like, the if I'm getting sued or I'm suing someone, that's public record of the county, right? I don't mind if that's you can look it up. The problem I have is how easy it is. If you're like an officer, or you're someone individual who's in the political game or stuff like that, and you want to look into public records and stuff, that should be allowed. But you already have a mindset who you're looking for. It shouldn't be as easy as typing my name and having all my, what I consider semi-private, semi-records, it's just open out. They make
So
it too easy.
since you're moderating this discussion,
Mm-hmm.
right? How do we want to go about this? Do we want to talk about data, like sensitive data that we're using, or do we want to talk about, just general data itself? Or
So I want to point out that, to me, I think right to privacy encompasses any of your data, right? Anything from something as sensitive to your social security number, from anything, maybe even you liking a page on Facebook, right? So I think all of those things are encompassed by your right to privacy, and depending on who you are, you'll have varying degrees of beliefs about which of that should be public and which of that these companies should be able to sell or use advertisement targeting for. So before we get more into that, I want to point out why privacy is important, even for something as simple as a page you've liked on Facebook, for example, right?
Yeah.
So, given the amount of influence and pressure that social media can generate, right? It's very easy for people to kind of influence the decisions of individuals, right? So, if I have the right amount of data on you, right, I know, hey, who do you watch, right? What news do you consume? Which artists do you like? What products do you use, right? I can kind of get a very good general sense of the type of person you are. I can get a good general sense of what you believe in. But more importantly, I can get a general sense of kind of how to take advantage of those things, right? So let's say that I'm a political candidate and I want to run advertisements that are going to be able to push you towards my campaign or make you agree with me more. With the right set of data, you can do that. Let's say that I'm a company and I want to target you with advertisements. I can set up advertisements and different marketing campaigns in a way that I'm targeting you specifically based on the things that you've done and the data that I've collected on you, right? So now, this is me taking advantage of the data of you that's been made public by these other companies, or maybe Facebook has sold, or Google has sold, or let's say sometimes, it's even as extreme as, hey, I'm a company on my website. I'm monitoring everything that you do, every ad you click, every move you make, right?
like TikTok.
That's a song. That's a song, actually.
So there's a lot of stuff that people can't, don't realize can happen when even small things, like I said, the pages you like and the posts you interact with on social media are leaked or kind of sold. And that can even get, elevated as high to something like, for example, your big streamers get swatted all the time. How does it happen? People dox them based on public records typically, right? Their records are posted online, and based on a phone number, a name, a general location, right? It's increasingly easy in the modern internet era to find somebody online. And no matter how hard you really try to hide yourself, it is almost impossible because of the amount of data that is naturally made public about people, just by doing something as simple as, registering a business, buying a house, filing your taxes, right? So there's a lot that can occur from a little bit of data. And like I said, even your smallest, most innocent seeming data points could be very, very valuable in the grand scheme of things to people who want to influence you. And this is why I think the right to privacy is very important. If you guys want to give your opinions on that matter, that'd be cool too.
I think a really good thing to mention that you mentioned, like even like small bits of information, right? Is that a lot of people don't realize, like, oh, what if it's just my name? Like everyone knows my name. When I go out, I just say my name, right?
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people don't realize that even semi-innocent looking bits of information could lead a rabbit hole down to even more deeper connections, right? And I think a lot of people tend to forget that, like, as simple as just an email, I can essentially basically query that email into a bunch of like search results and see what I can pick out, right?
Yep.
And then in an instance, I'm having a whole magnitude of more information that I can use to eventually keep picking at, and to get until I get deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole. So I start with just a name, get to an email, then from that email I get to your account. You may have posted something that may have seen innocent an assignment at what account, but now you just basically say where you live, and it just goes down that hole.
Yep.
And people don't know this. Like it on the surface, it looks so innocent, but it can get down real quick and it can go bad. And that's how swatting starts. That's how doxing begins. It's really dangerous. And the way I really to view this is, I think of like the internet like a piece of white clothing, right? Think of the most whitest shirt, right? and any information you put in there is a stain, right, on that nice white shirt. Sure, you can get it out, but you're gonna have to use bleach and some heavy duty bleach, right? And at that point, if you're putting heavy duty bleach, scrubbing your account, checking everything, that's a like everyday task. You gotta constantly check your accounts, constantly make sure, and it's just a pain. It should be easier right now, but like you said, it just makes it harder and harder for people to protect their privacy and make it easier and easier for people to dox each other.
Yeah, I'm in that same mindset, but I guess my main issue on the right to privacy, I guess, right, if we're talking about data, right? For those of you who don't know, I'm a huge data junkie. Like, I mine data just for fun.
Sticks it in his arm all the time.
Yeah, I just mine data just for fun. It could be the weirdest data, right? Like, I remember a couple years back we were looking at election data, right, to predict elections and stuff. So it was for fun stuff, right?
Yeah, this was Friday night, by the way.
Yeah, this was a Friday night. College, like I said, it wasn't a big party here in college, but one thing I find interesting about rights of privacy is with the amount of information that's online, the amount of identity theft also increases. So I'm trying to think, like, and it's identity theft that you necessarily may not even get caught with. So prime example of this is someone who had a Facebook account, right? Facebook account, right? You happen to figure out what his other accounts are, what his interests are, hobbies are, whatever it may be, right?
Yep.
But you find out this dude died, right? Or this girl died, whatever happened, right? But all that information is still online. It's still public, right? Corporations still don't have a way around this because we're still in the relatively young age of big data. To how do you handle a dead person's data, right?
True. Yeah.
So it's I've seen some really bad things that people get away with all the time. So Social Security fraud is actually one of the big ones, where you have a person who's of old age who died, right? But, right, because their accounts are still active and these things are still active, you have people who somehow gain access to those accounts. It could be in legal or illegal means, right? And they go and modify their information, modify it so it looks like it's them. And then when they ask you for proof of identification so that you can go and do other things, you give them those IDs and those accounts and everything, and boom, Social Security fraud is really done, right?
Yep.
And other types of fraud and other types of mechanisms follow suit like this. So when we're talking about rights of privacy, it's a very dangerous thing because it can have severe consequences on not just you now, but after you die, right? It could have very severe consequences due to estate laws and stuff like that, at least in the States, right? So it's very interesting to bring this concept to light and make people realize that the things you post on the internet, you should be very mindful of because that can be taken in other complete ways. So I don't know. That's just my idea.
That TikTok thing you post can lead to your identity being gone.
Could. Who knows?
Easily.
You're no longer Frank.
For example, TikTok I can give you a perfect example of that. Every TikTok you post is associated with some metadata, right? So with that metadata, I have the coordinates of where exactly you posted it and the device you posted it on. Boom. Now, as a developer, I know that you posted it in this specific location, and this is the phone that you were using. So now that I know that, hey, Charlie, whatever, right? Charlie posted this TikTok at, 3:55 p.m. and he or she is located in, I don't know, Alabama, right? Tuscaloosa, Alabama, right? And they posted it during a University of Alabama football game, for example, right? So it's I have all that information and I'm gathering all that information, and it may seem like trivial information, but now off the top of my hand, I know you're relatively close to Alabama, or you flew there for the game. You're a fan of the Alabama football team. This may not be your first time at an Alabama game, so I could probably go through Alabama school records and track, how many other times you visited a game like this. You're probably sitting in relatively the same price range for the seating area, right? So it's so that gives me an idea of what's the potential you're going to spend on your seats. And I could even narrow that down. There's actually trends and reports written that, if I spend $50 on a seat, you're making X amount of money a year. And now I just tracked you and figured out how much your income is per year.
Yeah.
And then I could even track, and depending on how many other people are on the TikTok, I could figure out, okay, they went with 4 people. What's a 4 row of seats, right? So it's like, there's so many ways that one TikTok can come back and haunt you in ways you have no idea about.
And let's
right?
think about it too, right? So you went to an Alabama football game, okay? I mean, let's say maybe you went to a Giants game, a New York Giants game, or you went to San Francisco's 49ers game, right? Now, these are different things that might be included in your security questions, your passwords, right? So every little bit of data that you post, it can all come back to bite you in the butt, right? So a lot of people happen to use things as simple as the football team they like, the type of car they have, right? What they're into, their hobbies, their dog's name,
their
all of
favorite
these things.
movie, which I bet you 90% of people have liked on Facebook.
Exactly.
Your mother's maiden name.
Yep.
Which is public records.
Oh,
so I mean, these are all just different ways that your data can come back to you eventually, and like I said, they just bite you in the butt. So this is why it's very important to be super conscious of what you're doing on the internet and the data that you have floating around, right? So I think this brings a good question. Does it fall on the consumer or the corporations to protect this data? As in, should you as the consumer be responsible for monitoring what you put out there, what pages you like, actually thoroughly reading different things and, figuring out what you are willing to kind of put out there? Or is it on the companies to not sell that data, not use it maliciously, right? And then kind of guarantee your privacy that way. So what do you guys think? Who do you think it kind of falls on?
I'm personally in the boat of, it's probably not the most popular opinion, but both, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think the consumer has the responsibility of saying that, okay, I'm signing up for a Gmail account. Google's pretty reputable. Google's pretty safe. Let me give them my name and let me give them my actual name so I can set up an email, right?
Mm-hmm.
Normal stuff, right?
I think safe is relative in this, right?
Safe is relative. You're absolutely
because
right.
Google's one of your biggest companies in terms of selling data and collecting data.
Exactly, and Google makes money off ads, right?
Yep.
So it's like, but if I'm just setting up my own personal email for my own personal use, it's a little bit of a trade-off here, because since I'm using their service and it's a free service, I have to give them some data of mine for them to actually, just do stuff with. So it's a trade-off, right? But if I'm signing up for, some sketchy website that's selling me, I don't know, clothing that I don't necessarily want to put my full name on, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just browsing around for, right? Or like one of these gaming websites and all the time, like Addicting Games I used to play way back in the day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, why would you use your real name on Addicting Games or stuff like that when there's no actual benefit for you doing that?
Yeah.
Right? So you have the consumer needs to be mindful about what information they're putting out there, because it can come back and have negative effects on you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, conversely, I think corporations should be held liable as well, right? But corporations, I think, need to be held at a certain level depending on the data that's been breached or the data that they're storing. There needs to be some sort of I won't say regulation, right? But I would say there needs to be some sort of, standard of how data is maintained. For example, if I'm giving Google my data, I, as a consumer, am giving Google my data. I trust that Google will be responsible with that data. The second Google breaches that trust in any way, shape, or form, then I have the right. Then they're liable at the end of the day, and they should pay out whatever damages happen to their consumer, right?
Yep.
That's how it should work. But for example, when you have companies such as the 3 big credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and I forget the third one, TransUnion, right? When you give these 3 credit bureaus your information, I don't know where you exactly sign up to give them that information, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are the 3 biggest credit bureaus, but for example, I think it was a year or 2 years ago, Equifax had the biggest breach. Oh, and guess what was lost in that Equifax breach? My social security number, where you can go and open other accounts in my name or other bank accounts in my name or whatever. I don't have that great of a credit score, so you won't be doing much, but right. Conversely, right, you can go and open accounts and do stuff under my name.
Yeah.
And what did we get out of that whole Equifax breach? 3 years of identity theft watch?
Yeah.
Great. A credit freeze, which sucks because now I got to unfreeze my credit so that I can go and apply for a credit card and then freeze it again so that no one else steals my information. Like, it becomes a huge pain for the consumer, and it just opened my doors up to identity fraud. And a lot of people don't know this, but those Equifax social security numbers and information, they're posted where? On the dark web. On the dark web, from what we learned in our cybersecurity classes, right? And what we've seen in our cybersecurity classes by accessing the dark web, I could buy a batch of 200 social security numbers for $20.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, seriously? Like, it's such a big thing that I don't like how corporations like that get away with it, right? I think, like, Equifax, for example, should have been shut down. That's a big enough data breach that Equifax as a company has proven themselves to not be reliable, and they should be shut down because of what had occurred. This is not a safe environment, and there should be better standards or precautions taken. And investigations need to take place for that, right?
Yeah.
Because you caused, I think at one point the statistic was what, 75% of U.S. citizens' information's out there because of that breach. Like, but we haven't heard anything about it since. Why? Because it's all just gotten brushed under the rug. And that stuff like that really pisses me off, because what can we really do here? I have to go through those credit unions, but why do I have to go through those credit unions? So I want to see some real regulation put on stuff like that, where if you have these agencies that are monitoring credit, or I have to deal with in order for me to buy a house or get a car or do anything with credit in the future, I think they should be held to a higher standard, a much higher standard, I would say, than, say Google, for example, when I'm willingly giving my information. Mm-hmm. But those are just my thoughts. Nine, what are you thinking?
I think it used to be like it should be on the consumer, right? But I always thought also, as time goes on, that unfortunately, like you said, especially with like services like Google offers and Apple and stuff like that, there has to be a margin of trust, right? You just can't have no trust in these relationships when you offer their services, right? Like you said, they have to know something about you, right? Maybe a name or email, some information to be shared, some sort of established trust must be established, right? So when you tell me where should privacy falls on the consumer or corporation, I kind of have to agree with you. It has to be on both, right? Mm-hmm. As a consumer, I want the tools, I want the accessibility to be able to shut down things that I think are breaching my privacy, right? I want to be able to go to any corporation that I see that's breaching what I believe is a breach of my privacy and be like, no, that can't be allowed, and I want it gone from public eyes, right?
Yep.
As a consumer, I should be able to access that, request that easily.
And those settings should be easy to find and accessible.
Yeah, exactly. It shouldn't be a maze to figure out how to turn off my username or even how to disable my real name from being like displayed PlayStation or anyone else. Like, it shouldn't be that difficult. But at the same time, I know the average user isn't too tech savvy. I've seen it firsthand, right? And it's not their fault that they're not tech savvy. They have, it's not everyone should know the
generational gap.
Yeah, it's not even a generation gap. I see even people within our generation that don't even take this privacy issue that seriously. And it's not really a matter. Partly, some of it, I would say they don't care. Partly it's because some people don't even know the consequences. Partly is some people, they can't, handle the responsibility. This is kind of like a heavy duty task. You have to not only just scrape all your information, but you have to constantly do so. You don't know that if any day one of the accounts that you thought were perfectly cleared can come up, red alert. You don't know one privacy breach that you made an account for some dumb site that you made like 10 years ago during middle school got breached. And now that information is leaked. And that information is tied to like 20 other accounts you made. So now those are breached, right? You got to keep track of these things. I talked to so many family relatives, friends that don't even know the tools that are available to them to essentially protect themselves in this case or be aware of them. There's partly of lack of information of how to protect yourself, and there's partly of it's just more complicated than it should be. So while I think, yes, the consumer should fall on them, they should be responsible, I also know the average consumer isn't going to check and browse all their accounts every day. So I also think the corporation should be it. And more of it, I don't think it should be more like the corporation should be helping us out, because we know like motivations and stuff like that, they're not always in line with the consumer, right? Mm-hmm. It's just business practice, how it is. Sometimes their motivations, their principles just don't align with the consumers, and in some cases that's fair. They have a certain, a certain goals that they have to reach as a business. It doesn't align with an individual. So I can totally see why it shouldn't fall 100% on the corporation. And if you do, you're just going to cause more problems when you're putting that much control on a corporation entity that you trust. Once again, let's go back to the issue of trust, the degree of trust. I think it should align with the consumer, but I think a corporation should have, one, make it easier. That should be a standard across every corporation offer any services. It should be easy, and you should offer a set of certain privacy options for any sort type of account or service. Maybe like it should be a rule that, like, if I want to take away my full name or have it displayed, it should be an easy accessible option set by standards. And a second thing, when a breach does happen, I think it should be set in stone exactly the consequence of that is. I think it shouldn't be such, oh, your privacy's breach, we have to do a lawsuit to get you guys to act. I don't think it should be like that. I think, harsh punishment should be set out. I think examples should be made to corporations who have fall through the cracks and have pretty much show that they don't care. I think examples should be made. So while I don't think privacy should fall heavily in the corporations, I definitely think there should be some reform in that aspect. I definitely think there should be standards set in place for the consumer, for them to use their tools properly. And of course, there's going to have to be a public education on this, right? The public, an average person should know what should be available to them, how to work through these privacy issues, and what they can do if a case like that happens.
Yeah, those are
Well,
all,
what are your
very
thoughts?
good points. So, I tend to think that you were pretty much kind of correct in your assessment that it's a two-person thing, right? It's not going to be either party is going to be able to kind of provide total control over the situation. I think you need the consumers to be aware of what they're doing, but you also need the corporations to be kind of faithful and trustworthy in what they're doing with your data. Now, let me give you an example of why I think that this kind of needs to be the case. So, I would say it's fairly often that data of yours, without your consent, and maybe without you even being the one to have provided that data, is consumed and used by different corporations, right? And if you guys remember and you recall that lawsuit I was talking to you about, the Instagram one that is punishable by up to a $500 billion fine, where they accidentally collected biometric data in terms of facial recognition data on different users that never, you're right, maybe it wasn't accidentally, but that didn't consent to their privacy policies, right? So not only are you only as good as your own security and your own privacy standards, but you're only as good as your friends, right? Who's going to say that I don't post a photo with you and then Instagram goes ahead and collects your facial recognition data off the photo that I uploaded, with or without your consent, right? Maybe I didn't ask, but I mean, realistically, it's a photo taken, maybe in public. I might not need to ask to upload that, right? So there's plenty...
Fun fact, we even had one dude, I don't know if you guys remember, we had one dude in one of our computer science classes, right? He was so adamant about his privacy, and I respect him for it, right? But like when we took like class photos and stuff like that, he stood out of the photo. He was like, nope, not getting in that.
Yeah.
And so it was like, interesting.
I totally, honestly, I didn't see at the time, understood why. I thought that was like too much. But honestly, like looking back on it now, I think that's a bold move. And I think that's a great move, what he did, I think a lot of people kind of see it as a weird move, but he's one of the few that I respect, because he's taking his privacy in his own hands.
Yep.
Right? And he's actively trying to mitigate privacy breach outside of his control. Because that's when it really stings the most, is when you do all these steps, every information, browsing through all, and then something gets breached that is completely outside of your control, and everything falls apart.
True. Yep.
And you're safe as your strongest link,
correct.
basically.
And let's think about this, right? You guys know that I'm really into security and, hacking and pen testing and stuff. And let me kind of walk you through why your friends posting things about you, or even just them having lax privacy, could lead to you then being kind of found out, right? Or tracked down. So let's say that you have a friend and, he's posting photos with you.
I have a friend.
Right? And your friend doesn't have the same privacy standards that you have, right? Maybe he has his full name available. He has his general location available, right? He has what school he goes to and all these different things available online, right? Now, if I know that you're friends with him, just somehow, and I'm a bad guy looking to find where you are, I can use the data I know about him to help find you, right? So if I know that you guys are friends, I can assume that you either know each other because you live near each other, your family, you went to the same school, right? You met through some extracurriculars or something. But I have a pretty good general idea that you guys might have some links together, right? So then I can just track down those links. I say, hey, maybe I know your first name, but I know his full name and the school he went to. I can look through sports records, right? I can, kind of check out the generic email patterns. I can look through school web pages. I mean, eventually, by looking through the couple friends you have, kind of on your social medias or people I know that you communicate with, I might be able to kind of track you down regardless of how serious you take your own privacy and data security. So this is why you, like we said, you're only as good as your weakest link. Now, you put that really well. And, if you've got friends on your socials and kind of on your video game profiles and you know that they're not taking security seriously, maybe you want to kind of rethink having them on those accounts because who knows, maybe, them being lax could be the reason that a hacker finds you or, someone that wants to swat your house finds you, right? So these are good things to take into account.
And then to these points, I'm going to bring up something that Nine said also. She said there needs to be some sort of public education around this, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. But I guess my question, I'm going to pose this question for you all, right?
Okay.
What's the public education you guys are thinking of? Because we hear about this term in so many aspects, personal finance. Now we're hearing about it here in privacy, right? So I guess my question is, where or how should this be taught, and how should consumers or regular people go about it? So I don't know, Nine, let's start with you since you brought up the public education point.
I think it should be taught at every stage of anyone's life. I think it should be taught sort of like as health is taught throughout different stages of our life, or has manners, or even things like security when you work for a company, right? I think they should all be taught at different points of your life. Mm-hmm. If you're in school, even at middle school, teach them the basics. It's never too late to start young, especially with how early these kids get access to like the internet. Like I seen like it's the common trope now is that parents just give their kids iPads just so they don't have to deal parenting them,
mm-hmm.
and these kids are like I seen it firsthand, like 5 or 6, and these kids are not dumb. Like they know how to like really navigate the web, right? But
Some
they don't
better
know.
Than me.
But they don't really know the consequences of what they're doing, right? Yeah. And you can't really blame them because no one taught them. Like they're just 5. Like they just want Roblox to work on their iPad, damn it. So they don't care if they put their username as Robert Smith and his last 4 digits of his social security number. So like these things should be taught throughout the whole system. I mean, as young, you're not going to teach them the complicated networks of their social security numbers and the complicated network of the rabbit hole that leads down to it. But, you can start young, be like, hey, don't use your real name, don't use usernames, don't tell anyone your real name, your address, where you live, standard things. Some sort of like how you teach kids not to talk to strangers. Same thing applies to here. And then as it goes down to they get older, it should be taught again and repeated throughout the whole education system. And even outside of the education system, it should be enforced. Businesses do this all the time. They're in training. They teach you what not to say, what to say, because it might harm the public image of their overall reputation. Same thing applies. It should be taught that you as an individual have a right to their privacy, and you shouldn't affect the business image too. This thing should be taught throughout all, especially even at later points of your life, where we see a lot of like, like you said, the generation gap. These people are not tech savvy or don't know what tools or what's even going on with the terms of privacy and stuff like that. Yep. So it should be taught continuously, right? This is like a thing that has to be just taught throughout. And as technology evolves and as the landscape of the internet itself changes, as we saw the last 20 years, the way we protect ourselves are going to have to change too. So we have to, evolve with these things. It might be even more difficult later down the line to quote unquote protect our privacy, but it has to be done. And so as just like how education evolves, our education for teaching education on privacy should evolve with it.
Yep.
So it's a give and take system.
No,
Or what are your thoughts?
I think nine. You're totally right. I think a continuing education on this stuff needs to kind of happen. Um, you're talking about in your modern education system, you've got kids as young as in elementary school getting Chromebooks, being given usernames and passwords and access to Google Classroom and Hangouts,
Which is a real name more than half the time.
Yeah,
100%.
Well, I mean, when you're talking about in school, I mean, I think they should be real names, right? You're not going to have fake names for your school email address, right? But knowing kind of what they should be doing on the internet is important, and being able to teach kids who, like you said, get iPads from, maybe sometimes even before they start elementary school, right?
100%.
Like what to type, what to take pictures of, what to put out there, right? And then also, how should different companies be responsible for interacting with those kids? Right, so I mean, I'm sure you guys saw a couple of years ago, Google and YouTube were on were under fire because they were targeting advertisements to kids, which is against the law. And I can't remember the exact name of the law, but essentially it protects children from having data collected on them. Right, so are certain kind of steps the government takes to protect children online and to protect their privacy, because they are more susceptible to targeted campaigns than I think adults are. Even though adults are very susceptible also, like I said before. But also, you're right. There is a kind of generation gap right now. Your elderly folk and your older people, they might not have grown up around the internet. Growing up around the internet, even if you don't have these kind of, I guess, formal education programs in place, you kind of learn the rules of the road, right? Or at least I did, and I think you guys did, and a lot of, our friends and family did. You just understand what to do. And you just kind of learned it as you went. The internet was not nearly as safe of a place years ago as it was now, right? And I think that's pretty true. Things like encryption and cryptography are now protecting your data. You've got more laws and regulation that protect your data. Companies actually have to care now because otherwise they'll get fined. I think there are more resources for self-education also right now, even though formal education on the matter, I think, still needs to be expanded. I'm pretty sure you find that a lot of companies also have security programs where they're educating employees. They have policies and procedures regarding how to interact with data, who has access to data, right? What they can do with it, what they can sell, what they can harvest. It's becoming a very big deal, and I definitely think that in terms of privacy, especially in the last year or 2 years, we're moving in the right direction. And I do think you're right, though. I think more formal education on the matter is the way to do it. And really any education to everybody would be best. If you're in the school system, it's easier. But for, like I said, the older people that aren't in school anymore, maybe things as simple as like library classes or, maybe webinars or something. Or just, probably do them in person because a lot of these people that are older might not be as tech savvy. And I mean, it would be really cool if we could see different companies maybe sponsoring these types of events and like sending cybersecurity and privacy experts out, right? And kind of interacting with the public on these topics and showing that they care, right? This would be a really cool kind of maybe initiative that could happen. I mean, maybe I'm rambling now, but I think these are all kind of cool things that could happen and would make data privacy and security much better.
Yeah, I'm gonna play devil advocate actually to both of your guys' points, right?
Hit me.
So you guys both brought up some really great points. So I guess one point I want to counter here is that I don't know if formal education is the best idea, right? Because as we've seen with, personal finance, that's also not the formal education system, right? Do I think it should be incorporated? Yes. But I think it's also the responsibility of you as a person to continuously go and self-learn, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, as we were having discussion, a thought that popped into my head is, for people these days, you have financial analysts, right? So people who are not good in personal finance, they hire a financial analyst who manages their finances for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I see in the not too distant future, something like a privacy analyst, where people who suck managing their social media accounts and stuff like that and spill out way too much of their information online, right? Hire these guys to make sure that, hey, they're controlling what you're putting out there, control what you're exposing, and just maintain your data all around, right?
So let me first to make your point clear, right? You're arguing that the fact that personal finance is not offered as in the education system, therefore it shouldn't be offered privacy education because it should be something that people learn themselves, and otherwise you have a loss of market because
Well,
financial analysts will, eventually cease to exist if it's taught
I think what he was saying is that he believes personal finance is taught formally in the education system, but people
Well,
still suck
he said
at
no, no, no.
personal
He
finance.
said no, no. He said it should be. He said he also agrees that it's not right now.
Oh,
And he's saying,
okay.
and he's saying that just like personal education, privacy education is not, it shouldn't be taught as personal finance, because it should be something that someone learns on their own. And if
I
you
think there
also
should be a
teach
baseline. I think
if
there should be a baseline understanding of both personal finance, even though that's not part of this conversation, and privacy, right? I think there should be a baseline understanding, but I think there needs to be a continuous self-learning exercise that needs to take place, right? I think you should go and once a year go scrub your social media accounts for anything that you don't want to see public, right? I think you should go and take a look at all of this stuff. I think that's more of an onus on the person than it is on an education system. You can't baby people forever.
Sure. But I still want to hit that devil advocate point, because there probably are people out there that does have that argument, right? Exactly what you said, right? Where it shouldn't be taught because, just like personal finance, if you teach it too much, then you lose jobs like financial analyst, which can be a possible future in the privacy world with privacy analysts, right?
Yeah. I think the main devil's advocate point I want to say here is a very small point, but one devil's advocate point I want to say here is, like, in the school system, for example, right? How I believe you brought up that they use your real name in the school systems and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
I hate that. I personally hate that. I don't like that they use my real name and all this information on the school system for my emails and stuff like that, because, to be honest with you, I've worked in the tech departments at my old high schools and college and, right, even advised in middle school at some point, right? These guys don't know what the hell they're doing, man. Like, they have no idea how they're handling the data, what's going on with it. It's just sitting there. They'll be like, all right, not even going to worry about it. Whereas me as a hacker can go and steal that data, and guess what? I can go and open student loan accounts, right? Which is actually one of the biggest fraud schemes happening now, right? Student loan fraud is actually one of the highest forms of fraud now, because student loan frauds, unlike other loans that you have to get, they're not right. They're not credit checked. They're not checking anything on those realms or anything on those records. It's just there.
True, but the point I wanted to reach, right, when you said earlier, right, just to make sure anyone who has this argument, is that the fact that personal finance, like you said yourself, personal finance should be taught, I think is just a failure of the education system. I don't think that's a point to be made for privacy education itself, right? The fact that we're not teaching proper financial skills to people, right, is a failure on the education system's own. Not essentially a reason why it should be applied to privacy education, right?
Well, I guess it comes to those questions that, is it really? Now, I'm not saying yes or no on that realm, but I'm just saying, is it the responsibility of the education system to teach us that, or is it the responsibility of you as a person to go and learn that?
I think it comes down to the definition of an education system. What it defines for you as an education system? For me, an education system defines as something to teach you skills, knowledge that should prepare you for your future. Basic skills and knowledge to prepare you for your future. Some of it might be specific knowledge that maybe retain to your career of choice. Maybe it's not, but basic skills that a human being should know, an adult should know, right? I think first, finance should be definitely taught. Now, I'm not talking about complicated stuff like I should know exactly what my 401k, the consequences of how they're being invested and stuff like that, or if the complications of option trading and stuff like that. I'm not even going deep into that. I'm talking about how to write a check properly. I'm talking about how to properly open a 401k and what are the rules and regulations involved to it. I'm talking about basic stuff that are benefits that apply to you when you even start a job. These are things
I think to counter that point, so to your point of what I believe an education system is, right?
Yeah.
I believe an education system is not there to teach me everything I need to know to live my life, right? I think the education system is there for me to teach me the basics, teach me what I need to know, the essentials, right? But I think the education system should be there to foster critical thinking skills and self-learning skills that you can go and learn anything on your own.
See, that's the thing, though. I agree with you, But that's the difference, though. I claim, and I label what I just said, the skills, the financial skills things, as essentials. These are things that you will do in your adult life. Open a bank account, how to check your credit score, what not to do and what to do to increase your credit score. These are things that I 100% agree, 100% believe that are essential. And the point of you're saying that, oh, we shouldn't teach it because it doesn't foster thinking or self-improvement, I don't believe that at all. I think if you're an individual who has the self-passion to learn, you will learn it. That's internally. And while the education system definitely has its courses and its individuals, like I'm talking about teachers that really, I'm talking about really good teachers, because I've met some great teachers that personally see their students as a way to really foster that type of thinking, all right, and really do it well. I think they will get it, even if financial knowledge is taught there. I don't think me learning how to write a check properly or how to manage my debit is gonna stop me from furthering pursuit how what's it called, what I want to learn, or self-learning. And in fact, I think it can even do the opposite effect, because once I learn the basics, and that happens all the time with any field you're learning to, if once you learn the basics of the financial world, it might even instill to you, for many individuals, wow, this is actually pretty fun, very, very interesting. I didn't know you could do this and that, or I didn't know how that is. I might want to look deeper into this, maybe do option
I
trading.
think we could get later into the failure or non-failure of the education system. Let's continue with the agenda we have.
I do just want to point out one more thing. When it comes to self-learning, I don't think that your younger students are able to self-learn things like data privacy at a very young age. And I do think data privacy, especially since young kids have iPads and internet access, is something that should start being taught as early as elementary school. Those kids don't really have the opportunity to self-learn, and I don't really think they should be, because they don't really have the kind of senses to determine what's good and what's bad data yet. So I think formal education is probably definitely necessary for them. Maybe as you get older, you can make a better argument for self-learning towards like high school age kids and older. But I think you need to at least start with formal education, because it's important enough when they're that young and don't have that ability. Anyway, moving on, I wanted to talk about current legislation regarding data privacy. So there's a couple of kind of like laws and regulatory frameworks that stick out to me. One, we've got PCI compliance, which is kind of payment card industry compliance, which is kind of a standard of how to store, transmit, use credit card data and credit processing data. We've got HIPAA, which is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, which kind of sets forth a set of kind of rules and regulations when it comes to transmitting health data, who is able to kind of access and view health-related data at your company, in insurance agencies, with doctors. And those are two of the big ones in the United States. You've also got a European framework, which is pretty much brand new and arguably the strictest kind of privacy and security laws that might exist in the entire world. That's GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation. These are very, very strict. They have kind of rules across the entire board of data privacy and the internet. Most notably, for example, I believe any company that deals with data under GDPR needs to give the consumers of their platform and technology the capability to view and revoke consent for collection of data, but as well as revoke consent for that company to use any data they've ever collected on them. So I know,
I like that.
I know I actually heard a talk at one point regarding this, and it's actually a big problem, right? When it comes to compliance with a lot of these rules, think about how hard it could be to tag data forever, and no matter what you do with it, no matter where it goes, you've always got to keep track of whose it is and be able to revoke it at any point in time, right? Let's think about this in an ecosystem like Google or Microsoft, right, where they've got so much data. Even just having to add a small tag to everything they have to kind of ensure that they know it's yours, that could be problematic, right? One small tag on that much data could be a huge amount of storage they need to add now, but as well as like processing changes. And I mean, you've got to now change almost like everything, right? Think about the table schemas that might need to be changed in databases and whatnot. And anyway, aside from GDPR, there's also the CCPA, which is the California Consumer Protection Act, which kind of seems like it wants to mimic what GDPR is doing in terms of allowing consumers to always kind of view and remove data from websites that they're using. So this looks like it's a kind of good initiative for better data privacy in the U.S. Now, I do want your opinions on this. Personally, I think a lot of these might be necessary because, I know we went over this before with, which should the privacy requirements fall on, the consumer or corporations. The consumers, obviously, it's in their best interest to monitor their data, and it's in their best interest to make sure what they're doing kind of falls within their own personal bounds of morals on data privacy. But companies, unless there's laws to prevent them from doing certain things, they don't really have that same kind of, outlook, right? So there's no benefit for them to protect your data unless there's risk for them to not protect it, right? So I think these rules and regulations, personally, I think they're almost requirements now because it is a big deal. Hackers are a big problem, and data needs to be secure. And beyond that, I think at the end of the day, you are the consumer. You should own your own data. So what do you guys think?
I'll start off with this one, right? I like all these laws, right? Yes, it may be a pain for them to actually go and revoke all my data or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm thinking in terms of, let's say Google as the example, right? Because Google's the prime candidate for having tons of data, right, on people,
mm-hmm.
right? If they're getting data on me, they're collecting data on me, but they have a unique identifier for me. They have my email address, right?
Yep.
Which I set up with Google, and so all my data is tied to that Gmail address. So if at any point in time I'm like, hey, Google, stop using my stuff, right? They can literally just go in their database, and I don't know if they do soft deletes or they do hard deletes, but they just find my record of all my data and just go, bing, gone, right?
Yep.
Obviously, this is more on the theoretical level than actually physically doing it, right? But that's sort of the gist of it. And I'm sure I'm sure companies like Google, right, have restrictions in place that first prevent their own employees from seeing that data, but on top of that, it also prevents what's it called? I'm pretty sure they have like IDs associated with each and every one of the people they track.
Of course,
right?
Sure,
which is billions of people across the world. So regulating to something like a GDPR, although it may be a pain for the company, right? I think it's the most beneficial for the consumer because the consumer at the end of the day can literally go, hey, no, stop using my data. I don't want any of this, and call it a day, right?
I do want to point out one more thing, and I think that this is kind of an overlooked piece of the whole, I own my data, I want to be able to, or I should be able to revoke it, right? Think about things such as backups, right? Your data is still in backups, right? Some companies do backups on like tape storage, which isn't meant to really be changed or modified or accessed, right? They might have petabytes of things on tape storage as backups, and now they've got to go and process your request for data removal in a certain amount of time. You have a time frame. I can't remember exactly how long it is, but there's a time frame now, right? Now, depending on how large their kind of, I guess, backups are or their data lakes are, it might not even be physically possible for some of these companies to revoke or to remove your data in the time frame allotted, right? So I think that lawmakers do need to bring experts in on these things to kind of take care of these edge cases where, even if a company has the capability to do it, the expectations might just be too high for them to do it in like.
But what that's telling me, right? I like that point, but what that's telling me as the consumer is that, hold up one second, like, why are you hoarding my data like this? I never told you to back up my data. This is my data. If it gets erased, it gets erased. I don't care, right? Why are you backing up my data is the question I would pose for that. Because they're backing up their own data. They're doing their own data storages and everything. Yes. But why are you backing up my own personal data? Like, that's none of your business or concern to have.
At a baseline, right? You gotta realize it's all for your convenience, right? I'm sure it's in the privacy policies that you accepted that they're backing up data, right? It's got to be there, or that it's going to be stored in multiple locations. And I mean, it's realistically, they're providing you with a service, and if they want to continually provide you that service uninterrupted, they need to have reliable backups, right? So, I mean, I think it's almost like it's a requirement, right, for companies to have these backups in order to continue to provide you that service.
Well, if it's a requirement to have those backups, there should also be requirements right, to modify that backup data.
Of course.
Right. So if I'm putting in a request for that through GDPR to say, hey, stop using my data, Google or whatever company that's handling my data should or come up with the ability for them to go and be like, all right, delete, here's the main database, it's deleted there. And then you go in the backup database and delete it there. Or even better, delete it from the main database and they handle all their main deletes from the main database, right? And then they overwrite their backup so that my data is no longer in the backup. So you would still meet those requirements because we all know data is backed up on a daily, nightly, hell, even a weekly basis, depending on the data, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I don't see unrealistic timelines for them to actually remove that type of data, right? So I guess some modifications in corporate strategy, like data strategy, would have to be done.
Correct, yeah.
But they can easily be met to handle that stuff.
See,
but that's on GDPR, right?
And you're not wrong. But we also got to remember, right, these types of laws are now being pushed in the United States. So whatever affects GDPR, I think within the next 5 to 10 years will inevitably affect us in the United States also. So these are important questions to ask. And like I said, I think right now, you're totally right. A lot of the stuff is doable. But, these laws are new. They're not old. And a lot of the data that is kind of affected by these laws is still new data. I'm talking about 20, 30 years from now, you might have been using Facebook for 30 years, and now Facebook, you want to kind of go say, hey, Facebook, I want to revoke my data. They've got to go through 30 years of stuff to pull that, right? With a 1 week time frame allotted on them removing that data, right?
And I think I agree with that, right? Because it's like, look, if a person dies, right, erase their data. Why do you still have the data, right? Because it's a security concern at that point for that person. Right, for the person, for their families, or whatever it may be.
To be devil's advocate, right?
Yeah.
I read about this, right? A big part of the problem is that Facebook doesn't even have the knowledge that someone's dead. Like a part of the problem I read is that because they sometimes the death is instantaneous or sudden, right? And they haven't thought properly. What if I'm gone, right? Stuff, and they take precautions for it. There's no way for their loved ones to come into their account and change that they're alive, right? Yeah. And Facebook even addressed this. Like they made certain memorial pages and even like some privacy settings in your thing where you can label certain individuals that you trust to make these changes in the case that you do perish suddenly. So, Facebook have made some movements towards this, but like you said, part of the problem is not even just to be like devil's advocate. It's not really just a corporation being like, oh, I'm not going to deal with it. Part of it is just because they don't really have the knowledge or the know-how, the accurate information that this guy is actually gone.
And and to that point, right? That's a valid point. But I think you need to also monitor like active usage logs, for example. Like I have a Facebook account I haven't touched in 7 years, right? I logged in the other day because my mom was like, oh, they're wishing you for like some things I've done and everything, right?
Yeah.
And I go and log into the account and Facebook's like, sorry, the account's not active. And I go, what the hell are you talking about? And it's like, the account wasn't active because I haven't logged in. And I think Facebook has it for 90 days or 120 days or something like that. I haven't logged into that account or even had it set up on my phone. And so it was like, okay, so what do I got to do? And I had to go through either friends to verify it or an email, which I don't even have access to verify it. But Facebook has other mechanisms to let you verify it as well now, too.
Yeah,
let's think about this, right? So when it comes to you being dead, for example, right? And your kind of account is left over. Let's think about this from a legal standpoint, right? When you entered Facebook, right, you kind of consented for Facebook to have your data. Whatever data you have on Facebook right now, unless you've made the request to revoke it, you gave them your consent. Now, you can actually revoke that under certain laws like GDPR or CCPA, right? Under certain laws, you can go ahead and tell them, hey, I no longer consent to you having it, get rid of it. And then they have to get rid of it if you qualify for those laws, right? But if they don't, if you never revoke your consent, legally they have no reason to give up that data, at least under the current laws, right?
So
but if your next of kin come up and they want to get rid of it, then I think it becomes their right because they inherit your will, right? So if they want to get rid of it, then you have the right to do that.
But I guess my final question to pose this is, right, at what point, right, and I don't know if GDPR makes this clear. I don't know. You guys can tell me this one, right? At what point is the data the corporations, and at what point is the data mine?
I think that's a line that everyone has to figure out to define.
So I think if I had to kind of just give you my opinion, this obviously I'm not a lawyer on the matter, so it's just my opinion on it.
I don't even know if they have laws for lawyers to even look into on this matter, to be honest with you.
Maybe not yet. Maybe eventually. But anyway, I would assume under your stricter laws, when you provide data, and you've agreed to the proper policies for it, right? That data is your data, but you've consented for the company to use it under certain standards preset in your privacy policy agreement, right? And if you revoke that...
So is that like renting your data?
Maybe. That might be a good way to think about it.
Licensing your data?
Yeah, maybe you've... That might be a good way to think about it.
Trying out your data?
A free demo for your
free
data?
Free trial on my data?
Just seeing how it fits my data?
This data is a little small for me. Do you guys have a large?
A large quantity of data, perhaps?
Yeah, we got big data for you.
Yeah. Anyway, but it's a tough question. All right. Anyway, the last thing I did want to touch on really quick. We'll take 1 or 2 minutes on this. Are privacy policy agreements in terms of service agreements good enough to dictate what data you've agreed for companies to take? Right? Because personally, nobody ever reads those things. You just hit accept. Everyone knows it. The government knows it. Right?
That's not true.
How can it
I
be
read
possible?
all of them.
How can it
Really,
be possible that something that nobody
Mm-hmm.
in the world reads is legally binding? Right? Like that doesn't make sense.
It's funny story about that one. I don't know if you guys heard about this, but there was one case where there was a small company had a terms of services, right?
Yep.
And if one person actually read it, and in the terms of services, it said if you read this part, you're entitled to $300. So he called them, and he actually got $300. And it took like a couple years for someone to actually claim that $300.
I've only met one person in my life who's actually read the terms and service agreements of everything, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of our professors from college.
Yep.
All right. He was the only one, and he was the only professor also who read those terms and service agreements, right? So it brings up an interesting point. Do I think it's good enough? Hell no. Like no.
I can barely read my emails completely in the morning.
I don't read text messages, so it's like like.
I don't read.
Yeah, Ford definitely has experience with not reading text messages. Let us tell you.
He's an expert, we say.
But no, it's definitely not enough. And it's interesting that you bring up this question because I found a website the other day, and I think I sent it to you guys. It's called like Terms of Service didn't read.
Yeah.
And it actually summarizes the terms of services, like every major website for you and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So it's like they had
So that's
Apple
dope.
on there, Microsoft on there, Google on there. And I thought that was amazing. Why? Because no one in hell is going to sit through a 95-page document that says privacy policy and terms of service.
Right? I think it should be very simple. Maybe this isn't always possible, but I think for the most part, companies can manage something like this. Maybe just give a quick bullet list of essentially what type of data they're going to be collecting, right? The biggest things. Maybe they have to kind of provide a certain percentage of the data they're collecting in a summary on the front page, right? In 4 to 5 sentences, in size 14 font, not size 8, right? And then bam. Maybe if you can make it a couple sentences long, a paragraph, people would actually care enough to read it and at least get a gist of what they're accepting, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it needs to all be laid out. I don't need to understand absolutely everything in the agreement. But so long as you give me a summary of generally what you're doing, and there'd have to be some type of laws that would require them to make that summary kind of like, I would say, good enough and like faithful and trustworthy. Not that they're kind of evading some of the stuff that they're doing. But
they're definitely evading.
Anyway, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself with these, but I think those are simple things that companies can do to kind of just make their consumers understand more in terms of what they're kind of agreeing to.
Yeah, and to finish it off real quick, right? We talk about privacy, we talk about how it should be responsible consumers. I just, want to leave off with what Tu said, right? There are tools that you can use that actually make the whole privacy management thing easy. Like one he just said was the term of services didn't read. I highly recommend it's at tosdr.org, right? Great tool to use for someone who, trust me, no one's going to read all the terms of services. Get out of here, right?
Or any,
right? So there are tools out there. And another one I want to also point out I used for years is Have I Been Pwned, right? Great tool. And I'm honestly really surprised how little people know about this tool. It's simply you put in your email and it tells you every single privacy breach that is associated with that email. Put it in there, cross your fingers and, pray that you don't have a bin.
Cross your
And
fingers. I've had Yahoo emails for years, bro. I'm
Uh,
already screwed.
you're screwed. But let's hope that the average consumer isn't. And like
Yep.
these are just one of the many tools that you should be aware of.
Yep.
You know, tell your friends, tell your families, right? The privacy game, as we said, is a long, hard task to maintain. But there are tools, just like with any part of aspect of life, to make your life easier. And I think, you know, it's only our jobs also to, you know, signal these things and highlight them for everyone.
Yep. Anyway, guys, we are probably a little bit over time now, but anyway, we hope
This
you
is a
enjoyed.
big topic.
Yeah, it was a big topic. There's a lot to go through here. But let
Please
us know
let us know
what
if
you
you
thought.
guys have feedback. Yeah.
Yeah, give us some feedback. But that is it. We are out of time, and we will see you on TechCast Friday. Bye-bye.
Always, bye guys. Thank you.
Bye, guys. Take care.